We do this.
This is amazing. You guys feel this? This is energy.
I love that.
The Mitchells vs. the Machines is the most honored animated film of the year. And now it's nominated for the BAFTA Award and the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature.
Katie, this is your time to be a hero.
Mitchell's engaged.
This is like super beautiful.
I've always felt a little different than everyone else.
Families can be hard, but they're so worth fighting for.
The world needs you.
I need you.
The Mitchells vs. the Machines, rated PG.
Welcome everyone. On behalf of the Cartoon Art Museum, we are really excited to have you here for the evening and to welcome our special guests for tonight. Before we do that, I just wanted to run everyone through really quickly in case you haven't gotten the privilege of joining a Zoom before. Hopefully everything's working all right for you. You can type stuff up in the chat if you need some assistance. However, if you have a question for tonight's panel, please look at the bottom of your screen for the Q&A button. If you don't see it, please look for, you'll see 3 little dots either horizontally or vertically, and you can click on those dots and it should reveal a Q&A option where you can submit your questions there during the event if you didn't get to submit your questions beforehand. And with not much further ado, I want to welcome, so I'm the program coordinator, Nina, and I'm going to welcome our curator, Andrew Farago, to join me in introducing our panelists for this evening's event. And hey, Andrew, welcome. Glad you could join us also. And I'm gonna go ahead and sort of pop out and make room for our panelists tonight and hope that everybody gets to enjoy.
Great, thanks very much, Nina. Okay, and I also want to thank our friends at Sony Pictures Animation and Netflix for making this happen, and for our esteemed panelists for taking part in this tonight. So this was one of my favorite movies that came out this past year, and I know a lot of us are saying that. But I'm really excited to welcome everybody. So I'm going to start with Mike Rianda, who is the writer and director of The Mitchells vs. the Machines. And it says here, it's a very personal project inspired by your own delightfully crazy family and a childhood infatuation with robots.
That's true. I have both those things.
And prior to this film, you worked at Disney Television Animation, where you served as a writer and creative director for the Annie Award-winning show Gravity Falls.
Yes, that's true.
Which is a big favorite at my house. So
cool, great. Love it. We worked very hard on that show.
Excellent, we could tell. Next up is production designer and character designer Lindsay Oliveras. And
hello.
Her film credits include DreamWorks Animation's Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted, Penguins of Madagascar, Trolls, and Sony Picture Animation's The Emoji Movie, and of course, The Mitchells vs. the Machines. So we're very excited to have you here tonight.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here with you guys.
All right, and to save time, we're going to double up on the introductions here and introduce both Phil Lord and Chris Miller at the same time. So they're Academy Award-winning filmmakers, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, the prolific multi-hyphenate duo behind some of today's most successful films, including Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the Lego Movie, the Lego Batman movie, one of my favorites, Mitchells vs. the Machines.
You're counting our credits?
Both 21 and 22 Jump Street, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And known for their unique sensibilities and maverick mindset as writer, producer, directors, Lord and Miller have spent their careers pushing the boundaries of creativity to deliver a fresh, unexpected perspective with each of their projects.
Thank you.
Everybody.
That was lovely.
So yeah, welcome. Congratulations on the Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature. So that was not a surprise to me. Was it a surprise to all of you? Were you?
We take nothing for granted.
Good.
Yeah, you have to convince yourself that you're not going to win anything. You're like, well, a job well done is its own. Oh, we won!
Awards are meaningless. This is all just a big. Oh, this is so great! Hi, Mom.
You trample your niece to get to the screen. Like what? But no, it's very nice, and it's a real sort of tribute to the whole crew. The everyone who worked on this movie did such an amazing job, and I'm really pumped for all of them, and it's really nice to be recognized that way. And all the movies are great. You know, it's a great year for animation, so it's really cool.
And I'm impressed with the diversity of styles that we see in the feature animation category every year, and every year it just that bar keeps getting higher. So I'm just kind of knocked out by that.
It's an exciting time. I feel like we're on the cusp of a golden age where people, for a long time, a lot of animated features felt like they all had to look the same, and people are waking up to the fact that anything can make an animated movie look like whatever you can imagine now. You can bend the technology to your needs rather than bending the film to the technology. And I mean, in Mitchell's, that was sort of our guiding principle throughout making it, which was, how can we push this into a way that you haven't seen before? What thematically do we want to say visually, and how can we do this in a way that is an experience that's be brand new for the audience?
And so I rattled off a whole list of credits, other projects that you've worked on. Spider-Verse, Gravity Falls, Penguins. So how did you find each other? How did this group come together?
In a warehouse. There was but no, it was basically Sony for some reason was approached me, the other guy from Gravity Falls. Like the other guy's busy. What are you up to, bro? But it was
That's
really
important, actually, Mike. One of the things that's great about our studio is that, and I don't think we could have made this movie anywhere else, is they, seek out, like young voices that have a new point of view, like Mike.
Yeah, and it was really wonderful. I mean, it's like we, when we made the movie, like we're really young and full of energy, more so than now. And we were like writing manifestos, like we're gonna change everything about animation. And it was really wonderful because there were kind of no rules at Sony, which meant you could kind of write your own, which was really awesome. And then it was like we found Lindsay and Jeff Rowe, the co-writer and co-director, and Guillermo Martinez, and all these people who are really excited to make their first movie and to try to break all these rules and to try to sort of make animation more like what we believe the animation should be. And then it was like even more wonderful to have Chris and Phil come on, who were working on Spider-Verse at the time, and the movie was sort of the studio was like, all right, there's no X-Men in this. I don't know what we're gonna do here. It's like my dad, who the movie's based on, is like the furthest thing you can get away from an X-Man. And so, but because it was an original idea, we were sort of like, we Chris and Phil saw it and they really liked it, I guess. And we're able to sort of come on and shepherd it through and say, no. These people aren't insane. there might be something here, and they not only sort of helped get it made, but sort of really encouraged us to all these like weird ideas that we were like, are we allowed to do this? And they're like, go! There's no rules, baby. And it was awesome to have our producers be cheerleaders for all of our most unique impulses, rather than prison guards, which sometimes is what it feels like. So it was a really wonderful experience, and it let us do, you know, and then we found all these collaborators where it's like we're like, oh, we want the movie to look like a watercolor illustration because the movie's about humans and humanity, and we want to see that humanity in every frame. So then Mike Lasker and his team at ImageWorks jumped on, fresh off of Spider-Verse, and none of them wanted to go backwards. They're like, well, we're already doing all this crazy stuff. We're not going to go back to the old ways. So, and that was really cool because that's exactly what we wanted to do. And we're like, how can we make this happen? And they like invented line tools and new shaders to make things more like make the whole world look like a painting. And it was really wonderful and sort of beyond what I even thought the movie could look like. But sort of like and it nicely ended up dovetailing with the themes of the movie, because the movie is sort of about trying to sort of find a balance with technology, because it's not going away anywhere. It's so you have to sort of learn to live with it and learn how to use it to connect with other people and reveal your humanity instead of hiding it. And that's the same thing that the art team did with the CG. They used the CG to sort of reveal the hand of our artist, as opposed to sometimes CG hides the hand of the artist. And it was really wonderful all the way down the line. That was a really long answer to a very simple question.
What if my goal is to have there be only one question? It's like if you guys are fans of improv comedy, it's like a herald.
Right.
Yeah.
It's called a Q&A, not a Q's and A's.
Right. It's just one. It's a Q and A's.
Mm-hmm.
One Q and the rest is A's.
That's all I had prepared, really. So.
Oh, good. See, came to the right place.
But Mike, yeah, you mentioned your dad, but can you talk about your family and how they influenced and inspired?
Oh, sure. It's funny. I was actually just with them, and my dad really never fails to be the character in the movie. He had a trash bag of acorns, and he was like, brought them to my mother, and she's like, what do you want me to do with these? And he's like, we're gonna eat them just like the Native Americans used to. That used to be the #1 crop in California. And I was like, acorns are poisonous. He's like, you boil the poison out. I'm reading a book about it. And then he started.
How do you prepare acorns for delicious consumption?
I think we all found out that the answer is you don't. They were revolting. They're super bitter.
What do they taste like?
It's like it's really bitter, and like the best thing you could do with it is like make flour out of it, which he kind of didn't get to that step. We were just eating, like these gummy, nasty acorns.
I feel like you could make a nice like digestif from it.
Yeah. But no, it was not. You would not serve it in a restaurant where they use that word. He would find them in a gutter.
Here's boiled acorns.
Yeah, exactly.
For dessert.
But the dad in the movie is almost exactly like my real dad, and that was something that sort of like came from that whole manifesto thing I was talking about, where it's like we were trying to, because sometimes in animated movies it's like, oh, the dad is movie dad B with mustache A and briefcase C or whatever, and we wanted the characters to feel really real and lived in and specific. Because I think all my favorite movie characters are like really hyper specific, and I think we found that when we leaned away from like the formula of what a dad is supposed to be in a TV, in a movie or whatever, people connected to it more because they're like, oh, that's like my dad. And surprisingly, when you made it more specific, it became more universal. And we found that all down the line throughout all the characters, and they're all sort of based on, some version of people in my lives or whatever, especially Katie, who I had issues with my dad, about going to art school and stuff like that. And I think all of our crew did.
It sounds like the acorn thing maybe suggests that he wasn't super into the art school idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although he would like James Benning's class, I'm pretty sure.
I will say it speaks to a madness that also sort of an artist has. So
I guess that's
there is
I guess that's true.
some connection.
From my side doing character design, it was really great because, you know, the movie is so much about specificity, and that's something that I love too. So it was so nice, like having Mike have these characters that he knows so personally and sharing reference and having these kind of attitudes to, you know, and personalities to explore. Cause like Mike was saying, like you see in animation a lot where it's a certain type of family or dad, and they're a little bit more perfect or aspirational, and their, you know, their shirts are ironed and pressed and their posture's great. And so it was so nice to like see real people that gives you such a great foundation to kind of play with. And it felt like that was so important to the movie, that our humans are really human and that they can be really familiar. And so as a designer, I loved that it felt like, okay, he knows who these characters are. So it's easy for me to know, to then find ways to play with that in design. And I think through with all the art team too, it's like, we all kind of got who Rick was because we heard all these stories, like the Acorn story about Mike's dad. And so in all of their props and all their sets, it was super like, easy to bring that really specific personality to it. So it's kind of fun having something that was so personal.
Okay, yeah, and I want to follow up and ask you about developing Katie, and I should mention, I think the second, like the millisecond that the teaser footage and images were out there, everybody just fell in love with this character, and I saw an insane amount of fan art just show up, like they zeroed in on like the glasses and the expression and the rainbow button. And can you talk about developing her and
and it's been so cool and rewarding to see, like fan art, like you're saying, or seeing people see themselves in her. And I think, you know, a lot of, you know, she was a lot of Mike, and I think a lot of us as artists too, we can relate to her. So it was kind of fun to think of people you knew in art school, think about the parts of yourself that kind of overlap with her. And so we went through a lot of exploration on Katie. She was kind of the one that was most deeply explored, and finding her and finding, you know, the specific ways in which she's specific. We've went down a lot of different routes of what it could be, like what type of filmmaker, what type of artsy student is she? And so we're really happy with where she ended up, you know, and we had a lot of really great conversations with Phil and Chris too about like, how can it just be this really clear, obviously like artistic, kind of creative and jumping outside of herself. And so like, she's drawing on her shirt, she's got little puppets on her jeans, she's drawing on her hands, and, you know, all of those specific details have been really cool to see how people have seen themselves, like, oh yeah, I've always been drawing on my hands. And so it was really nice to, you know, like Mike was saying, as the more specific you get, the more it does seem to resonate with a lot of people. And so that's been super cool. And so, yeah, I think we were putting a lot, wherever we overlapped with her as artists and creatives, I feel like we were putting that into her. And again, being really observed and specific, and, you know, her posture, the way she carries herself, the way she's kind of posing with her hands and stuff, it was all, you know, about being really observed and making her feel like this really kind of compelling filmmaker. And I think the more you saw her creativity, the more kind of compelling she felt. So a lot of that's in her design and her details. And then in things like our little 2D animations, where also kind of playing with her film style and how we can do this mixed media approach, so her point of view is also really clear. But yeah, it was always really important for us, like that our main character is someone who can be really, you know, just relatable and compelling, and it's someone who's not like an aspirational hero, but someone that you can relate to in your kind of real and perfect flawed ways, and hopefully be excited to see. And it's for those imperfections and for her, you know, that creative soul she has,
and that she's the star of the movie. You know, that like we were really working hard not to have her be like the kid or the daughter. We wanted her to be like the person that when she walked onto screen you couldn't look away. And she doesn't have superpowers or like a cool like superhero costume, so it was like, all right, well, what's her version of that? How like, this is a character who desperately wants to be seen by her dad, by these people that might be her new friends out there. You know, she wants people to know who she is. That's what all her filmmaking is about. So it makes sense that she draws on her jeans and her shoes. She has so much to say that she can't contain it inside of her body. It has to like leak out, and it becomes part of the movie. It didn't even stay on her jeans. It like spilled out onto the whole picture. And that was just an outgrowth of trying to figure out what kind of character she was. And it came down, and she also is the first queer protagonist of a movie like this. And that's a thing that also was discovered while we spent time thinking about her, talking to other crew members about her. And it was a thing that, that she revealed to us. And so like when you think deeply about these characters and take them really seriously, even though this is a very funny and silly movie about robots, we took everybody really seriously. When you do that, it enriches the character and the relationships and the whole movie.
Yeah. And that's sort of a thing that we found too, where it was like the more specific she was, where it was like Lindsay added this little, face on her jeans, and somebody, or the Korean marketing person was like, I draw on my jeans like that, and she felt seen. And then there's like, LGBTQ plus kids who are like, oh my God, she's like me, and like the crew members on the team were like, she's gay, right? And sort of like we talked with them and worked with them and like, well, how would we do that authentically and stuff? But it was a really like nice evolving process. And I do think that was a big breakthrough, the thing that Phil is talking about, where it's like she needs to be the star of the movie, and she needs to, you need to be able to wear a Halloween costume of Katie Mitchell, or else, you're just like, oh, that's a random girl walking by. Like, you need to be like, no,
Right.
That's the star of our movie.
Right. The Halloween costume test is a good test for like, is your character iconic enough? Is it specific enough? Is it interesting enough? Or like, just like generic character B, you're like, it's not good enough. Like,
and you can make this costume at your house.
Yeah.
With a little bit of forethought.
Katie Mitchell costume is definitely an easy Halloween costume. And I recommend it for anyone.
My sister-in-law was making one, and she was like, can you draw the heck yeah on the shoes? And I was like, having to look at the internet.
Oh, to check the font.
And I love that the characters were, that's why this felt authentic, is the characters were weird in such specific ways. And I absolutely loved Aaron going through the phone book and calling people up one by one, and like just that methodical one by one calling to ask people if they want to talk about dinosaurs. And
that's torn from real life, right?
Yeah, that was I didn't I was a lonely child. My brother and sister were way older than me, and I would call the video game store, the electronics boutique in the Northridge Mall,
oh my God,
8 times a day. And I'd be like, hey guys, do you guys have Battle Arena to Shinden in? And they're like, kid, you just called 8 minutes ago. And I was like, I don't have any friends. I was also an obsessive little kid who sort of like, except I was sort of more obsessed with cartoons. Jeff Rowe, our co-writer and co-director, was and is obsessed with dinosaurs, and he's like, that's a Diplodocus, get it straight, idiot. Or Diplod, I said Diplodocus, he said it's actually Diplodocus. I was like, that doesn't sound right. He's like, fuck off. But anyway, so I do think, and it just, sort of like, we were just trying to be honest about, ourselves as little kids. And it's like easy to make little kids like these little naifs who have not a care in the world, but when you're a kid, you're stressed out a lot, like you're like, oh, my sister's leaving for college, is she still gonna love me? So we tried to sort of capture what that was really like. At least for me, I had an older brother and sister both leave for college when I was a kid, and it was very sad.
Yes. And were the rest of you, am I making a leap by assuming you might have been the weird kids in your neighborhood?
What are you talking about?
It was definitely
I've heard of weird kids.
Yeah. It's really interesting working on this movie because, pretty much everybody on the crew could relate to Katie as like a bunch of film and art weirdos, and so it's really easy to relate to Katie on that front, being a person who grew up wanting to like draw things and make movies, and feeling a little misunderstood and like feeling like an alien child in my household. Very easy to relate to Katie. But now I'm also a dad, and I've got 2 kids, and they're getting older, and my relationship with them is getting more complicated. So it was easy to relate to Rick too. And the trick of this movie is that, you know, the center of it, the core of it, is Rick and Katie's relationship. And you have to, when you're making a movie about this, like, be able to relate to each of them and see that they both, even if they're seeing the world, they're making mistakes, the way they see the world is something that you as can relate to and empathize with as a human. And so when Rick is like nostalgic and looking backwards at the way he used to live with his, you know, when Katie was little and things were simpler and it was more of a simpler and easier and joyous time, you know, that's a mistake of like just trying to live in the past and make the relationship stay the way it used to be. And he has to learn to you know, be in the present and look to the future with his you know, with his relationship. And that's something he has to learn over the course of the movie. But me as a dad, it's very easy for me to relate to that, going like, oh man, remember when my kids were excited to see me come home, and how different it is now. And so it made it easy to like figure out how to calibrate the movie so that it wasn't just a one-sided argument.
Yeah. Well, and to sort of to that point of just sort of like I was actually just looking at that home movies scene and realizing that like the home movie scene is really, it's like when Rick in the beginning of the movie watches these home movies of Katie as a kid, and he's really making a mistake in that scene. It's a really sweet scene, but if he would have gone in to his daughter's room and just talked to her and been like, you're an adult, let's talk, the whole movie would have been avoided.
It would have been so short. It would have been a beautiful short.
Yeah, it would have been awesome.
They probably would have been caught by robots separately. And,
that's a good point.
And the world would have died. So
they would have been apart. She would have gone to college, gotten that plane ride.
Yeah, exactly.
Then he makes a terrible mistake, which is I canceled your plane ticket to college.
Yeah, exactly.
And he expects her to be happy about it. It is interesting. He starts the movie so nostalgic.
Yeah.
And we've talked a lot about the pitfalls of nostalgia, especially as it relates to making animation, you know, where we have now a pretty long tradition of animated features and, you know, studio made animated entertainment. And all of us are people that are interested in making things feel brand new and different, and remembering that we're nostalgic for a time when animation was an entirely experimental medium, which it still is. And film is an experimental medium. Like animation comes from like, scientists at the turn of the century and people making weird animation toys. So we always try to remember that like every movie we make should be a technique that no one's done yet. And on top of that, these should not be about things that are from the, they can be said anywhere, but they need to be relevant to this moment. And what I love about Katie is she seems like a protagonist for today. The movie feels like it's talking about this moment that we're living in right now, where we just lived through an apocalypse and we had to figure out how to navigate technology and have it not like eat away at our brains and turn us into data, but actually like make us closer to our friends and family and make us productive. And we're making these movies with computers, obviously, but we don't want to become, we don't want them to be in charge. We want the computers to be the same as a paintbrush. And so it's really important. It's really interesting to me that our movie starts with Rick looking backwards and Katie looking forwards. And it ends with Rick looking forwards going like, will you be my friend on the internet? Right. And so that's really important to us philosophically as filmmakers, all of us, that we're trying to look forward, and we want this movie to look ahead at what the possibilities of cinema are and animated movies are, instead of going, oh, let's just make it feel like, a classic.
Great. And that ties in with an audience question from Simon Willison, who wanted to know about
Oh, Simon, he has he has a great Twitter thread of all the cool behind the scenes stuff. Simon, what's up?
Thank you, Simon.
Excellent. So he wanted to know about working remotely during the pandemic, and how do you compensate for, he says, the lack of informal conversations, like random coffee encounters. And so how did you help feel like, how did you bring that
is a huge problem. That's a really huge problem. Luckily, we were mostly done with the movie when the pandemic hit. It was supposed to come out in September 2020 in theaters, and it did not because of the pandemic. But so when everyone had to go home and start working from home, the movie was 80+% done. So thankfully, we didn't miss out too much on that stuff. But you really do. The question is right. You those hallway conversations, the little like unexpected things, are a huge part of the creative process, and there's really no there's no substitute for it. Like the work suffers because of it. I mean, we've been working on the Spider-Verse sequel, and we've tried to do a thing where we go into the office to editorial, we test and whatnot, so we can go in like at least once or twice a week, so that we can at least have a few hours where we're together and we can just sort of talk informally and have a cup of coffee, and it really is an essential part of the creative process. And so I think it's
a team sport, and we did this yesterday, and it was so important. And we were just kicking ourselves going, I wish we could have been doing this for the last 2 years. Luckily, our crew were together for a long time, so there was a shorthand. But there's something about when you get creative people together to solve a problem, it grows exponentially. Chris and I are a partnership. One of the glories of that is got a lot of complications, but one of the great pleasures is that when we get together to talk about a problem, the answer is something neither of us would have thought of on our own. It comes from the conversation, and if you play your cards right, you make each other better. And that that is on theme with the Mitchells, and it's also a lot about how we our process in terms of filmmaking and collaborating. We try to be the guys who say yes. Mike is like that. Lindsay's like that. We try to be, okay, that is a new weird idea. That's not a liability like it might be in another filmmaking team. That is the engine that drives this whole process. Mike's weird idea, okay, I want to do this thing about a Furby. Okay, great. All we have to do is somehow make Furbies emotionally resonant and about the father-daughter relationship. We can do that, and then whatever, we did okay.
Yeah.
I do want to shout out Mike as sort of like this, like as a leader, as sort of like, come join my merry band of weirdos, and how he had a very clear sense of what he wanted tonally and story-wise, that he was able to articulate to people, and then was open enough to inspire crew members to come up with new things that he or none of us would have ever thought of. And like, there are many times when Lindsay would be like, we were talking about like, how can Katie sort of doodle on the screen to let you know that she's the author of this movie? And Lindsay would like go take a shot, go home and make her own little example of what she thought Katie vision could look like, and then bring it back on Monday and show us all, and we'd be like, that's incredible, let's do it. And there's a dozen stories like that where the Alan Hawkins, the head of animation, wanted the stealth bots, the big scary robots that break apart, to not move around like regular robots. So he invented this tool to make you able to slice them anywhere on their form, break them into pieces, and then reform. And he like did it again over a weekend, just sort of doodled around, showed it to us. We lost our minds. He showed it to the animation team, and they started using it in ways that he didn't imagine. But it's all because, Mike was open to letting people, like, as long as it was in the direction that he was trying to sale, like there it was a really open and collaborative process, and I think that's why the movie feels so special and bursting with creativity.
Well, and that was something I learned, and thank you. But that was something I learned on this movie in particular, was sort of, you have to like give people the rules of how to win. Like, I remember we had this like wonderful artist, this guy Kellen, who did so many of the greatest backgrounds of the in the movie, and he was like, when he first started, he was doing this ultra inventive stuff that looked like a fun house, and it was like so cool, and it kind of broke my heart, but I had to explain to him, I was like, oh, you're trying to win by making it as crazy as possible, and I love that, but for this Dino Stop background, it should be as realistically sad as possible, and that's how you win. And sort of like, how do you make the game like, oh, this is like something that I've seen at my, that me and my family saw on the side of the road one time, like, and how can you make it as real and observed as possible? And that's what success looks like in this movie. Or, and like Alan, where if these crazy robots, success looks like, how does it in as inventive as possible? And it took me a long time to sort of learn that, because sometimes I would just like get stressed out when somebody gave me something great that I didn't know what to do with. And then you sort of figure out that you're like, oh, you just need to explain to them what success looks like. And then once they know that, then they can just shoot, three pointers all day, because they know what they know what we're all going for.
Okay, and oops, sorry. So we have an audience question, and I'll kind of add a little bit to this. This is from someone named Bashi, who's 7 years old.
Nice.
All right.
All right.
Sorry about the bad word earlier.
So Bashi wants to know, and I'll build off of this thing that was just referred to as Mike's weird idea. But how does it feel to make something that was never made before?
Oh.
It was really hard and also scary, because you're worried. I think but it really relates to being 7, I think, because when you're 7, you're so free. Like, I found these comics that I made when I was 7 years old, and it was like, how a comic book page has like 5 panels on it? I found a page I made that had like 156 panels on it. And I was like, that's cool, man. I wish I could be that creative now. And I think you learn all these rules, and you just have to forget them. Just like when you're a kid, when you're 7 years old, you're the greatest artist in the world, because you don't have any of this pre-programmed garbage in your head. But you just have to sort of like take all the skills you get when you get older and combine that with the freedom that you have now, which, by the way, enjoy it. And sort of
may it never die.
Yeah, may it never die. And it is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to sort of be able to cast off these, like, oh, I guess we can have the characters doodle on the screen or something. Like, those are the most magical moments in the movie, is when like Lindsay made those, or one of our artists did something unexpected. That's the best.
And our crew had to remember what it was like to do it for the first time. It was a big technological hurdle, obviously, which was helped by working on, a lot of this crew came from Spider-Verse. But the other thing that came from Spider-Verse is a lot of these people learned to think like a garage band, and to forget the way you're supposed to do it. And on this picture, we had to remember what it was like to be a kid again and make things when you're a kid. Because there's something that you need to know about, well, I hope you never learn about. It's an adult thing. It's a part of your brain you don't have yet. It's called shame. And it kicks in sometime around when you become a teenager. And some people, it really trips them up. But don't listen to that. It's very important to ignore that part, because it's the thing that makes you suddenly self-conscious and aware socially of what somebody might think of what you're drawing. And the thing that's so special about being 7 and about getting past that stage in your life and remembering how beautiful it is to create without anxiety, and to love, not wonder whether you're good enough or not just to do it. Right? Is that you just the connection between the artwork and the soul of the person making it is immediate, and there's nothing in the way. And we wanted the movie to feel like that. And that's why when people had ideas like, what if I made a puppet and it had forks for arms and we shoved it into the movie and blah, blah, blah. It was like, yes, do it. Don't question it. Just throw it in there and don't fuss.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Oh, so that was what was so great is it was really felt kind of fearless in a way. And part of that is like Mike's directing style. And it was always the safe space to be like, what if it's like this? Like we didn't feel the pressure. And because it's story specific, that Katie's animation didn't need to feel like she had gone through animation school, because she hadn't. And she was more of a storyteller than an animator anyway. So we'd have to turn that off of this feeling of like wanting our animations to squash and stretch and have overlap. It was always about kind of pulling back, because that was more honest to the character, and it felt like the contrast was better because of that, because it felt uncomfortable sometimes to take a beautiful render and like literally scribble over it or let things be a little primitive. But it was just like, how do you keep that humor, that spontaneity of the moment, and not feel self-conscious about it, and let some things look a little imperfect? And yeah, our puppets they're like made with actual socks. Like Phil was saying, the pterodactyl has forks for arms, and they're out of cardboard and pieces that you could make in this kind of free, scrappy way. It wasn't about like harnessing a high budget puppet and being perfect about it. And so we tried to be as free as possible and let things be a little, there you go. There's some of the puppets.
That's from in the actual movie.
Yeah. So it was all really about embracing that joy of making art that is a little less self-conscious, and it's not really thinking too much about like being the best art. It's just like expressing, and it's really like free. And so it was just wonderful that was met with like such joy by Mike. Like I did an early animation test, and it was all about like, let me just draw these creatures, these like possums once and not fix them, and have like a primitive tool. And if I'm laughing while I'm doing it, I think that's good enough. And like, can it be stupid? And like, that will be fun and funny. And that was just met with like joy from Mike. And then from Chris and Phil, it was like, yes, do more of this. And so that was just a really great feeling, where it was never met with like shaving it off or making it feel more polished or making it feel more perfect. It was like, I think we all had a great,
we made this movie at a studio, but we're working outside of a studio style. You know, there is no house style at Sony. There's no house style in the movies that Chris and I make. They're all different from each other. And the idea is to have there be as much innovation and as direct an expression of the people and personalities making the movie as possible. They don't go through some sort of like design department that makes it look a certain way, or a story department. It's like, no, it goes through Mike and Guillermo. Right?
Well, and one little baby thing to add on to that is just like, because it also happened to help the story in this case too, because it's like the movie is about this teenager with this like infectious energy and can't control her own expression. So whenever we had that energy of a first year film student or whatever, the movie kind of weirdly got better because it felt like more of an expression of Katie Mitchell.
Right. And one other great thing about making, trying to make something that no one has ever made before is that you have each other, so that if you try something and it doesn't work, we have a lot of time to watch and go like, you know what, we tried it, it doesn't work, but it was really fun and we don't have to use it. And so the scariness of trying something that hasn't been made before, it only is that you're going to feel shame or embarrassed. And what's great about Mike and the sort of the attitude of everyone was like, it was never feel bad for trying something new. Yeah. Like I always feel like it's a safe place to try something. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't fit in the movie. And if it does, we're going to jam it in there one way or another. Anyway, that was a very long answer to a 7-year-old's question.
Listen, you got a lot of airtime.
Okay, thanks for the question, Bashi. And yeah, I think we're close to wrapping up here. So I want to know.
We could do a speed round.
Yeah, speed round. I want to know. We haven't talked about that incredible voice cast, and Mike was actually part of that. What was it like? Again, going from Mike's weird idea to you're hanging out with Maya Rudolph and Danny McBride and these amazing actors.
Well, I mean that was sort of another really cool thing about the movie and a big learning experience for me, because I came from TV and it was like, we need to get the reads, and it was really cool, working with Chris and Phil and doing the same thing with the actors that we ended up doing with the whole movie, where it was like, how can their uniqueness shine through instead of be hidden? Because sometimes you hear this wonderful actor in an animated movie and you're like, oh, that was that actor that I love. I could barely tell. It just sounded like whatever, because they're not letting them do their thing and they're not letting them play. And they're sort of, oh, there's a hiccup in that word, better shave it off, and we were trying to sort of draw out all of the things about our actors that were sort of uniquely them, much like we're doing with the art style, much like we're doing with, every part of the movie was like how to make, how to bring these humans and make them as close to the screen as possible, so there's no distance between, there's no like foggy distance between them and the character. They're just are the character, and it ended up being really wonderful for the animators too, because then they have these little flubs and stuff to animate to, so they're not just like, why did you do that, father? It's like, I'm just wondering why you would make that choice, dad, or whatever. And that's like ends up being a much more interesting thing to animate and to listen to, than somebody just reading a script, which sometimes happens.
Okay, we had a question for Lindsay about Katie vision and just the development of that, just Katie's wonderful view of the world.
Yeah, it's like we were saying before, when we were developing the character, she felt more right when she was kind of spilling outside of herself. And so that was kind of in my head, that was something that worked. And holistically as a visual language thing, how can Katie be more present? There was a lot of really cool exploration in the storyboards where I was kind of getting more clues of like what types of movies she's making, the puppets and stuff. And so it felt like you wanted to see more of her films, and how can that also be something that we can use to see her point of view, use to see her emotions when she's feeling good about going to college. There's little rainbows around her while she's like dancing and stuff. And so it was a way to see her mood, so you're kind of with her, rooting for her. And then it also kind of looks at, I think as a loose reference, we weren't trying to be super literal, it was more about her film taste, but I was looking at like the kind of spontaneity of things like Instagram stories where you're throwing stickers on things and you're using technology in this really handmade way. Like technology isn't all just, robots and machine stuff. You use it all the time and we have casual ways of using it. And so it was kind of looking at that quick spontaneity, the kind of collage feel. So it's like, let's bring in live action puppets, because why not? Let's film it with our own equipment and put it on a little cheap green screen at a poster board. And so it always felt more right when it mixed a lot of things. Like if it was just 2D animation, it felt a little animation-y. So it felt right when there was a live action thing, like a stock photo, 2D animation, text. And another thing was like density. It's like she's someone that's, I think, kind of always thinking, doing a lot, writing on herself. And so when she's kind of drawing on a frame, getting that density in there too. It's like she likes doing it. She's having fun with it. So things also felt right when they got really dense, and you can kind of keep looking and finding more. So we're also almost kind of rewarding the audience too as they're doing that. But it was right for the character that she was someone that was, obsessive and loves what she's doing, and she's probably staying up all night working on these films, and that density was helpful too. And so it kind of evolved throughout. We found ways to kind of have it go through the whole narrative, so there's little elements of it and then these bigger narrative moments to really sell her point of view.
Okay. And I'll mention for everybody watching this that I was really excited to see this. The entire art book of
very cool,
is available online.
Yes,
that's right. You can see a lot of behind the scenes Lindsay doodles and the evolution of Katie and all sorts of other amazing stuff in there. Like you see a lot of inspiration, and it's really fun that you can look at it for free on the interweb.
So use your search engine of choice. We don't want to play favorites here. Track it down. It's great. You'll want it on your bookshelf if you're.
And then buy it. Well, read it for free and then
books,
buy it. We get a fat cut off of it.
Yeah. So hopefully that will answer any questions we didn't get to tonight, and we'll wrap it up with this is the deep, thoughtful question. But what are you hoping audiences will take away from the film?
I can go first because I one of the things that I did at the beginning of the movie was like had this slide presentation, and it was like, I'm a crazy person, so people were like, is this guy on cocaine? What's happening? And I'm like screaming, and I'm like, art can change the world, art can change lives, and the thing, and that's really grandiose and insane, but the thing I sort of do think is true is sort of, I do think that people sometimes if you do your job right, art can make you sort of think about your life differently, and sort of think about the way that you live your life, and if people either can have a great experience with their family just for a night and have fun and laugh and quote it later, like that's huge win. And especially if it sort of inspires someone to call their dad or think about their family a little bit differently, that would be the dream, and it's really been nice to see that some people have been having that experience, and every time I read one of those I start sobbing. I'm a softie.
I know, I started almost crying just now. Because we talk a lot about, if we play our cards right, a movie or a story or whatever can help you imagine goodness, right? And we're trying to, like, you have all these amazing crew members of this wild imaginations, and we're hoping that we can represent, that one time that like two people talked to one another and they got through to one another, which doesn't happen all the time. Yeah. So that's really important. And the other thing is, I often think about these movies as like you're putting a message in a bottle and you're sending it out to sea, and you're hoping that it's going to land on some shore somewhere. You just have to sort of trust that it does. And when somebody picks it up and they feel seen and they feel like, wow, there's somebody who kind of reminds me of me and some of the things that I'm going through, and there it is. Or, like I'm queer and there's a character like me on screen and they get along great with their family. That's not their problem. Like that was really important to us. And it only takes a few of those experiences to get to really feel satisfied that like we made somebody's favorite movie.
Yeah, I mean, just on top of that, like I think people feel seen by those characters, but also like I think in addition, hopefully people will realize that they should, if the people in their life that are important to them, they should see them for who they are and not who they want them to be. And I think that's sort of why Rick and Katie can finally sort of appreciate each other at the end, is because Rick is sort of gives up on trying to make her in his own image and appreciates her for what is great about her. And I think if people can take that away, and then on top of that, there's also a nice message about how technology isn't evil. It's a tool that can be used for creativity and communication and all this wonderful stuff. And it can be misused and is often misused, but there's a positive way to use it. And that's why the movie ends with a Zoom call between the families, which is sort of especially appropriate considering the fact that we're doing this right now on a Zoom call. So and it's making this whole thing possible. So there's a lot of things to take away from the movie, but I hope that anytime we find people who it's really touched or meant something to, it really feels like it was worth it.
Yeah, and I think all of those things are so exciting about it, like whether it's people connecting with their family in a way after seeing it and all of that. I also think lately too, like I hope there's some other young Katie Mitchells that are watching it and feeling inspired, that will also, like for us, it was so fun to be like first time filmmakers having fun ideas, and how can we make things that we haven't seen before, and and that finding that love, for us it's like story and design relate to each other in such a way that you have a fresh story. How can I make this look like something you haven't seen before? Because it has to be bespoke for this story. It's like I'm excited too if there's other storytellers that can see this movie and maybe be inspired to like, what are their stories to tell and in what ways can they do? We were saying before how, for so much of 3D animation, we've been chasing like realistic hair, and how can we do it? Because we've been making these technological advances, and now we're in a little bit more of a space where we're saying, how can we use these tools to tell the stories we want to? And I feel like there's so much more to do with it too, and so many more stories and styles. And so I'm hopeful that there's other, Katie Mitchells out there that are seeing it and kind of, coming up with their ideas and their manifestos to so because I'm super excited about all the different types of stories we can tell within this medium, so I think that'd be a cool takeaway to see someone that's inspired by this.
I'll mention in the chat, we've included links to the book and the official website. Again, check out the art book. That should answer any questions that didn't get covered tonight. Nina actually had a question, my coworker, so she wants to jump in.
One question, dog or pig?
That is a loaf of bread.
Stop
if
trying
I've
to
ever
trick
seen one. Yeah. You need to smear some peanut butter on that thing and make a sandwich.
Oh yeah, loaf of bread. I'm sure he would love that.
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to talk to us tonight. Thanks to Sony Animation and Netflix for setting this up. We're so glad that we got this in-depth look at, again, one of my favorite movies. I was so glad that I got the opportunity to ask you all about it.
Well, thanks for taking the time with us, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. We love the Cartoon Art Museum. I went there all the time when I lived in San Francisco.
Okay, well, we hope to see you there soon in person. Again, we really appreciate it, and thanks to everybody who watched tonight. And good luck at the Oscars.
I hope you everybody gets to check out the links in the chat that Andrew mentioned before we sign off. Thank you. Also, if you want to find out more programs from the Cartoon Art Museum, you can check us out at cartoonart.org. And again, we've gotten the opportunity to do a few things with Netflix and you brilliant creators. So we are so thankful to have that opportunity. Everybody have a wonderful night or morning wherever you may be watching from, and we'll hopefully see you all again soon. Right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.